Hello, and welcome back to part 4 of an Arctic Odyssey. If you're just tuning in, we'd been traveling all over Iceland in our camper van for the past week, flying paramotors in some pretty legendary locations. Sam and I were headed towards the west coast, and after stopping for some amazing ice cream, we checked out this really cool waterfall hike to balance things out. We followed a peaceful stream for miles while being our ridiculous selves, and in no time we'd reached the narrow canyon full of these majestic white birds. The birds definitely had me wishing I was up there flying alongside them. What is it about waterfalls? This was probably the 6,000th one I'd seen that week, yet there we were, staring at it like it was the first one ever. After a long strenuous hike, we earned a relaxing stop at a nearby hot spring, where we had the whole area to ourselves outside of a few curious sheep. It felt good to slow down for a bit. Now smelling like sulfur, we even jumped into a glacial stream for a nice ice bath before embarking on a shipwreck journey the following morning. Yep, if you know me, you know I'm fascinated by shipwrecks, so I found this tight campground that made for the perfect LZ. I dropped Sam some peace signs as I took off, and quickly arrived at the rusty old ship. I really enjoy the mystery behind these things. I'm sure it has one heck of a story to tell from its days sailing through the Arctic. So the whole reason we decided to travel west was to find calm air, which we received, but we also received some other interesting weather as well. As I headed down the coast, things started to get a little foggy, but this was no ordinary fog. Due to the nearby erupting volcano, we were actually experiencing what is known as VOG, or volcanic fog. This limited my view over the next couple days, but overall, it just added to the Icelandic experience. I floated past several large cinder cones before it began to sprinkle on me. That was my cue to head back to the van, so I trimmed out to increase my angle of attack and decrease the amount of rain getting inside my glider. Things soon cleared up, allowing me to explore some nearby islands before packing up my paramotor. I had a few more flights in mind for that afternoon, the next flight being arguably the most photographed mountain in the entire country. Sam decided to go on a hike while I floated over the Viking Sword Bridge. I spotted more waterfalls, and several miles later, I came up on the summit of the legendary Mount Kirkjufell. If this looks like a scene straight out of Game of Thrones, that's probably because it is a scene straight out of Game of Thrones. I've seen some pretty incredible stuff from my paramotor, and this mountain had a way of making me feel incredibly small. Just a tiny speck in the sky, but a very fortunate tiny speck, to say the least. There were several other hikers on top, and although I wanted to go in for a closer look, the wind began to pick up, and the air was pretty turbulent. Flying back to the airport that I launched from was now a gamble, and I decided to land on a nearby road to conserve some of my $9 a gallon gas. Thankfully, Sam was nearby in the rescue van to help a guy out.
Excuse me, sir? Hola. Need a ride?
I have music playing.
I said, do you need a ride?
Yeah, I can use a ride. I'll take it.
We loaded up and drove straight for the nearest hot dog stand, and we found some more shipwrecks nearby that we couldn't wait to explore. Again, I couldn't help but wonder what kind of stories these old boats could tell, but we had a blast pushing buttons and acting like we knew what we were doing. If it looks like we don't, well, cut us some slack. We don't have a lot of oceans back in Kansas. We continued up and over a really cool road that took us past a glacier. It was amazing watching these huge boulders reveal themselves through the fog as we inched closer. It eventually spit us out at a slot canyon that had us pulling the van over once again. The folklore behind this little canyon is really fascinating, and it was definitely worth the stop on our long loop back to the hot springs that we sat in the night before. Less than 24 hours prior, I was thinking how incredible this spot would be to fly. Things had come full circle, and I've gotta say, it was even better than I could have imagined. There were a few people at the springs who got a kick out of the butt fan, but a nearby cinder cone caught my eye. I'd always wanted to carve inside the rim of a volcano, and today was that day. This might be the most Icelandic thing you can do with a paramotor, and I was having a blast just diving over the rim. I could see a layer of clouds rolling in, and I knew I had to keep moving if I was going to see everything I wanted to see. I traversed the lava fields and eventually came up on a shallow sea of clouds. Cloud flights were starting to feel way too normal here in Iceland, but I tried not to take them for granted. Eventually, I spotted some really neat cliffs that I had to drop down and fly along. There were ancient volcanoes in every direction, and the clouds were starting to limit where I could go. But I floated past this one just before it became completely engulfed in a fluffy poof of clouds. The lava fields here were vast, covering tens of miles, and it was pretty cool getting down close to them. This cinder cone was particularly neat because there was a car parked at the base, and I could see about 4 people sitting in a hot spring directly next to the volcano. It's no blue lagoon, I'm sure, but I think I'd still prefer the solitude out here. I was getting pushed further north by clouds, so I decided to pop up and check out a stunning mountain range. As a kid riding in the car, I always wondered what might be on the other side of that mountain. And one of the greatest things about a portable airplane is you can do just that, and tuck it back in the trunk of your Prius minutes later. And it was about this time it started to rain once again. I stashed all my camera gear and just focused on getting back to the van, safe and sound. Sadly, it was time to head back towards the airport, but not before stopping for one final flight in Iceland. My GoPro got knocked facing straight down on launch, but this flight was mostly just to dry out my wing. And let's just say, I got a whole lot more than a dry wing from this flight. Remember the canyon full of birds I wished I was flying with? Well, I couldn't resist the urge to circle back, and my camera getting bumped somehow made the shot even better.
Sounded like everything was breaking. Well, our tears fell like rain when the morning light came in the wake of that disaster.
To me, it's unreal how fast you can teleport yourself from an empty parking lot to a place so otherworldly. I think I captured as much beauty in this 15-minute flight as some do in their entire lives, and I couldn't be more thankful and happy to share it with others. Now that the flying was wrapped up, we checked out the Blue Lagoon en route to the airport. This whole area was pretty interesting, and we even got to play the pianos that Will Ferrell and Rachel McAdams once played. Then we noticed a crowd of tourists gathering along the shore. Dozens of orcas were feeding just offshore, which really felt like a proper farewell for Sam and I. Our time in Iceland was a blur, but it was hands down the most jaw-dropping landscape I'd ever had the privilege of flying. We checked in our van keys, and our Arctic Odyssey was complete.
Got a lot of bad days still coming our way, but it's sweet ever after.
The truth is, flying a paramotor is like floating through a dream. The sky is the limit in the most literal way. And while Iceland was the #1 bucket list place to fly my paramotor, this trip simply opened my eyes to how much untapped potential our little tarpon strings truly holds. Tomorrow is never promised, so it's time to keep dreaming big. Thanks for watching, guys.